Welcome, everyone. We are just going to wait about another minute or so for everyone to filter on in. So just hang on for us, please. Thank you.
If you want to tell us where you're coming from in the chat, we'd love to hear. All right, let us begin. Welcome, everyone, to Jane Austen and Company. My name is Anne Ferdig, and I'm a doctoral candidate in the Department of English and Comparative Literature at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, as well as the co-director of Jane Austen and Company. Jane Austen and Company is a free public humanities series hosted by the Jane Austen Summer Program. We are so pleased to see everyone here tonight for our final event of the year, a special seasonal send-off to our Staying Home with Jane Austen series. We welcome tonight Lauren Gunderson and Margot Melcon, playwrights of Miss Bennet, Christmas at Pemberley, and the Wickhams, Christmas at Pemberley. Miss Bennet, Christmas at Pemberley focuses on the middle Bennet sister, Mary. Bookish and overshadowed by her sisters, she finds her own grounding when visitor Arthur de Burgh proves himself to be her intellectual and spiritual match. For the first time, Mary must stand tall and become the heroine of her own story. Tonight is going to feature Q&A and readings from this play. But before we begin, we'd like to introduce our guests and talk about the structure of the program. So I'm going to hand things off to my co-director, Dr. Inga Brody.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. It's nice to see you coming in from many corners of the world. I'm Inga Brody. I teach at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and I'm a co-founder and director of the Jane Austen Summer Program, which is the umbrella organization for this and our other literary ventures. And I'm co-hosting this series with Anne. Lauren Gunderson has been one of the most produced playwrights in America since 2015, topping that list twice, including the year 2019-2020. She's a two-time winner of the Steinberg ATCA New Play Award for I and You and The Book of Will, the winner of the Lanford Wilson Award and the Otis Guernsey New Voices Award, a finalist for the Susan Smith Blackburn Prize, and John Gassner Award for Playwriting, and a recipient of the Mellon Foundation's residency with Marin Theatre Company. She studied Southern Literature and Drama at Emory University, not too far away from us, and dramatic writing at NYU's Tisch School, where she was a Reynolds Fellow in Social Entrepreneurship. She co-authored the Miss Bennet plays with Margot Malcon. Her work is published at Playscripts. I and You, Exit Pursued by a Bear, The Taming and Toil and Trouble are those there. Dramatist Play Service has The Revolutionist, The Book of Will, Silent Sky, Bower, Natural Shocks, The Wickhams and Miss Bennet. And Samuel French has her play Emily. Her picture book, Dr. Wonderful, Blast Off to the Moon, is available from Two Lions and Amazon. Our other guest, Margot Melcon, is an artist, arts administrator, and writer. She co-wrote Miss Bennet and the Wickhams with Lauren, the first two parts of the Christmas at Pemberley trilogy. Got that, everyone? Trilogy. She was the director of new play development at Marin Theatre Company for 7 years, where she dramaturged over 30 productions, including 6 world premieres, and administered the company's 2 annual new play prizes and commissioning program. She has developed plays with Theater Works, Bay Area Playwrights Festival, Crowded Fire Theater, Shotgun Players, Berkeley Reps Ground Floor, the Kennedy Center, the New Harmony Project, and the Playwrights Center in Minneapolis. She's currently the program executive for the community arts at the Zellerbach Family Foundation. Margot is a graduate of the California State University, Chico, and currently lives in San Francisco. We're delighted to welcome you both.
Thanks so much. What a joy to be here.
I would now like to introduce Emily Spera, who is our technical director for Jane Austen and Company, as well as our beloved registrar, the Jane Austen Summer Program. Emily is moderating the audience chat tonight, and she's going to explain to us now how the public Q&A will work.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here tonight. We are so happy to spend a little bit of the holiday season with you here. So tonight's structure, after we are done with our introductions right now, Inger and Anne will have a short conversation with the playwrights, and then we will jump into a reading of 2 scenes from the play. We have some actors with us tonight who we are so excited that they're here and that they're going to give us a little preview of what you can see in the play. That will take about 15 to 20 minutes, that reading, and then afterwards we will open things up for a public Q&A from all of you. The event overall tonight will last about 90 minutes. And as we get into the Q&A portion, please feel free to use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Now you'll likely see, or I hope you see, 2 boxes, a chat box and a Q&A box. Many of you have already found the chat box. You can probably already tell that chat will likely be lively throughout this entire event. So if you have specific questions for the playwright, please instead put them in the Q&A box. That's the box that Anne and Inger look at while they're asking questions to the playwright, and your questions will definitely be seen if they are in that box. If they go into the chat box, they might get lost in the conversation. Again, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Emily. Tonight's readings of Miss Bennet, Christmas at Pemberley, is presented by special arrangement with the Dramatists Play Service Incorporated in New York. We'd also like to take this moment to thank our sponsors for this program, including Arts North Carolina and Carolina Cares, as well as to everyone who donated on Giving Tuesday to support our program. Really, guys, we appreciate those donations. They made tonight possible, and they're also making next year's programs possible. So be sure to hang around after the program to hear what Jane Austen and Company have in store in 2021. Please note that parts of tonight's program will be recorded. The readings will not be recorded, but the public Q&A will be. So if you're interested in that, we'll be posting that to our website in a couple days. So keep an eye on our Facebook. And without further ado, welcome Lauren and Margot. We're so excited to have you here.
Thank you. Hi.
So we just kind of want us to start off this conversations with asking you guys, how did this play come into being? What made you want to write a play about Mary Bennet out of all the Bennet sisters?
That's a great question. And it's a slightly long story, but I'm going to try and keep it brief for you. So Lauren and I have known each other for 12 years now, so long. We started working together when Lauren first came out to Marin Theater Company, where I was working as a dramaturg. And over the course of knowing each other, we have worked on so many of Lauren's plays, her as playwright, me as dramaturg. And one summer in 2013,
Sure, let's say that.
well, we could say that. Lauren and I were at Berkeley Rep at the Ground Floor Project working on a play of hers that was associated with running parallel to King Lear. And at the time, Oregon Shakespeare Festival in Ashland was doing a production of King Lear. So we decided to go on a road trip to go check out that version of King Lear. It's about a 6-hour drive from San Francisco up to Ashland. And so over the course of that 6 hours, Lauren and I started to talk about how to solve the American theater. I don't know, like, what does the American theater need that it doesn't already have? And we kept coming back to this idea that there aren't enough holiday plays to begin with. There are just a few, and they're done pretty much to death every year. Um, but then also, there's not enough of the kind of holiday play that we were looking for. The most of the regular Christmas fare or holiday fare tends to be kind of dark when you really get down to it. Like A Christmas Carol is kind of terrifying in a lot of ways. And so, and the Nutcracker is beautiful, but if you've seen it, you've seen it. And, and there's lots of funny ones, but we weren't seeing what we were looking for. So we decided that writing a play for the holidays would be a good idea, a good place to start. And we started making this list of what are the components that make a really good holiday play. And we came up with this list that included, oh, Lauren, help me out. We wanted familiar, beloved character.
Familiar characters, happy ending, but not something so pat and easy that you can roll your eyes at.
Yeah, we wanted a love story. We wanted it to be uplifting. There needed to be some kind of rise at the end, some sort of hopefulness, right? And then family, because no matter what your background, no matter what your denomination, no matter what your history or your culture, the holidays really are about family coming together. So we started thinking about some of the best families that we knew, especially ones that focused on the stories of women and women's voices. Again, there's just not enough in the American theater stories that are focused on women and told from the point of view of smart, strong women. And so, of course, Jane Austen came to mind because she is really, she was at the forefront of telling stories about women that are smart and complicated and clever and witty, and there are always stories about family, and so it seemed to be a good fit.
Love, pretty costumes, girl power. This is all the things we need.
Yeah. And so over the course of the 6-hour drive, we came up with an idea to write a sequel to Pride and Prejudice. And knowing that Pride and Prejudice really cleanly resolves the stories of Jane and Elizabeth, we thought, who else has a story in there that needs to be told? And Mary, for us, was the obvious choice.
I love a nerd romance. I love a smart girl who is discounted and proves herself. So I think we had all the ingredients, and we added Christmas. And I think what was exciting about the building of the story was doing, of course, the research about what was Christmas in the Regency era, what were the historical elements that we wanted to keep, and what were the kind of just the edges of history that were starting to blossom that would come to more full fruition in the Victorian era, but we could maybe plant in the way that theater allows us to. So that's why we have, the first Christmas tree that anyone has ever seen. Lizzie Bennet is the one who was like, here's what we're doing this year. We're putting a tree in the living room and we're decorating it. And everyone is like, what are you talking about? But the idea that was right at the cusp of when that tradition was starting to be born. And of course, Margot going, we were thinking like, we can't have a holiday play without a Christmas tree. So we're going to try to shoehorn that in there and find every historical justification we possibly can. And so it was a really fun way to blend then, now, fiction, history, all of the great stuff that adaptations of Jane Austen, but also sequels and other versions of fiction can do.
And how did you divide up the actual writing of it, the design of it?
The outline was very much shared. It was like our 2-person writer's room saying, okay, so we start here and let's say everyone's meeting at Pemberley because of course you got this big house. That's where everyone goes for Christmas. And okay, well, what's Jane doing? She's probably pregnant. I mean, let's be honest. She's probably pregnant. Okay. So she's pregnant. Lizzie's this, Lydia's a mess as always. How do we get these people going? What's the churn? And then, as we, fill out the story, we know they're kind of going to get together at the end because Jane Austen would have it no other way. But what is that midpoint? What's this big crisis at the center, at the heart of the story? Who is the suitor? Is it somebody we've met before in the books? Or, well, we're going to have to be very presumptuous and invent someone. Okay, how is he related to this family? So all of these questions, and the idea of who Anderburg is, we decided right away to just let's kill off Lady Catherine, just see how that changes up the chemistry of these families in this area. So it was that kind of building process. And then the writing was like, all right, I'm going to take a pass at scene 1, you do scene 2, and then we look at each other's work and do rewriting in the middle. There's a lot of Google Docs, a lot of editing and checking each other's work out and saying, let me actually fix that. Well, let me fix your fix, and now we're back to this. And okay, and of course that's before we have actors and a director in rehearsal, designers, and all of the elements of live theater, where we learn a ton from all of the brilliant people that come together to collaborate on it. So unlike Jane writing for herself in in the north of England, we have lots of people constantly giving their brilliant ideas, their spins, their take, their sense of what it is to be Darcy, to be Lizzie, to be Mary in the scenes, and all of that filters back through us as we create the play to open on opening night.
When you first thought of Pride and Prejudice, did you remember that there are 6 mentions of Christmas in the novel?
There are indeed. And Lizzie actually says, come to Pemberley for Christmas. And we thought, well, damn, okay, let's do it. We're coming.
That's great.
Now that you've seen, it's been a couple years and you kind of have had this great process, as you've said. What is your favorite thing about the productions that you've seen so far of either Miss Bennet or the Wickhams?
What I love is how different they all are, because one of the amazing things about theater is, everybody starts with the same words, but the choices that the actors make, the direction that is given by the entire creative team, the designers, everything that they bring to it, for us, it feels like it's a brand new thing every time we see the work that other people bring to just the words that we put on a page. That's the most amazing thing. And that's the thing that I think is so great about a literary adaptation, is that, when you read Pride and Prejudice, and Inger, when you read Pride and Prejudice, like, everybody experiences it differently because it's happening in your head. The way great literature makes your imagination just completely come alive. And that's the same thing for us, is seeing our words in the hands of other people come completely alive with their imagination, which is great.
I mean, I have one very clear memory of that first winter when we had we opened the play in 3 cities at almost the exact same time, which is insane. It's wild. It's also amazing. And what a confirmation of the power of this story, and, what a great thing. But I remember seeing, just being shocked, because one of the scenes of the play has 5 women on stage. And that is a rarity in the American theater, to see 5 women without any men sitting together on a stage. And I have that picture in my mind of, I think it was our cast at Marin Theater, and the cast was very diverse. So you have all different kinds of women in these beautiful costumes, and they're all a sisterhood, they're a family. And just as a woman who loves theater, being able to see that, much less that it was, Margot's and I's play, but just seeing that was such a breath of needed oxygen into what I want theater to do, which is to tell more stories, different stories, and to have the kind of sense that, especially these adaptations, these literary adaptations, can be for everybody, and they should be. So I love seeing the diversity of people. Our Darcys look very different city to city, and our Lydias, and it really is just a delight.
Everyone in the audience, you can keep dropping questions into our public Q&A. We see we have a few questions already. So let's bring Lauren and Margot back into the conversation. So for our first question, somebody's asking about process. Did you plot the play out overall before sitting down to write the actual dialogue?
Yeah, yes. I think in a play as tightly structured as this one with so many references, with so many beloved characters to take care of, we wanted to really know exactly where we're going. The big point, though, which is for any of those playwriting or writing nerds out there, we were really relying on Lydia's shenanigans to hold the kind of counterplot of the play, the antagonism. And frankly, that was it was not enough. And frankly, Lydia's not that much of a menace. She's just a bit of a fool. And so we really had the biggest rewrite from our early drafts to our second came from a question by Sarah Rasmussen, who is a wonderful director and an artistic director in Minneapolis. And she basically said in every Austen novel, there's a point where all is lost. There is no way that this love is going to succeed. It is impossible. Everything is ruined. And we didn't have that. We had some uncomfortability and it was a little awkward, but it wasn't as dire as Jane would do. So of course we always go back to what would Jane do? And that's when the entire creation or this reimagining of Anne de Bourgh's character, who comes in not too far from this scene, right at the act break, when Mary and Arthur are just about to be like, this is great, what could go wrong? Enter Anne de Bourgh, who says, actually, Arthur's already engaged to me. So suddenly, everything is impossible. Mary thinks that he's been lying this whole time. How would you ever want to be with a person who you can't trust? Anne is, bringing her kind of dour bossiness, much like her mother, to the day, and Arthur is confused and distraught and totally embarrassed and everything is wrong and he's going to be married to somebody else. What are you going to do? So that was our big kind of revelation, that once we had that and this wonderful character of Anne, who quickly becomes like one of the characters to play because it's just a great role for an actor, and that's kind of the big change. Once we had her, then we knew that we could have a second act that's just full of a different kind of conflict than the first kind of will they, won't they of act one is.
And I do think anytime you're in a situation where you're writing with someone, clarity about where you're headed is really important, because, Lauren and I wanted to make sure that we were telling the same story. And so, sketching out an outline of the plot of what happens in which scene, where do the big moments of conflict happen, gave us the opportunity to write independently, knowing that we were both sort of on the same trajectory. And I will say we did borrow so much of that structure from Jane Austen and how she structures her novels, knowing that there are points along the way where certain things have to happen, new characters sort of have to be introduced in order to heighten the stakes and the conflict. So but having that mapped out ahead of time made it easier for the two of us to make sure that we were both writing the same story when we were writing, Lauren in her office across town and me in my office across town. And then when we came together, it didn't feel like we had been writing two separate plays.
So we have questions about how you rethought the Mary Bennet character. She's such fun in the play, and you provide the very nice motivation for why she was unappreciated, and you make use of her fondness for music. But some of our readers are commenting, or reviewers are commenting, in the book, she's so narrow-minded, judgmental, stiff, and kind of a pill at times. So how did you reconcile that for yourselves?
Oh, that was so much fun.
So fun.
That was so much fun because, if you read the novel, Mary has very little real estate, right? She gets, I think, a total of like 20 paragraphs in the whole book that are devoted to her, which is fantastic when you're taking that as a basis and using that as a jumping off point. She's not so well articulated that we felt, like hemmed in by it. And the main point of departure for us was that the way Mary is described in the novel is always in relation to her other sisters. So what happens when that comparison isn't there? Who does Mary get to be when she's on her own? When she gets to define herself not as the middle among five, or not as less pretty than Jane, or less clever than Lizzie, or more bookish than Lydia. Like, who is she if she's not compared to these other women? And, this is also 2 years after the end of Pride and Prejudice, and a lot happens between the ages of 16 and 18 in a girl's, uh, you know, um, growing up and becoming thoughtful and becoming herself. And it was so freeing to be able to give Mary a personality that was not dependent on anyone else, that was entirely of her choosing and unapologetic in who she was. She loves books. She is dedicated to music. Does not suffer fools and lets her opinion be known, because why not? Because why not?
And I
And
think, oh, sorry, I'm just so excited by what you're saying, because like, yes to everything Margot's saying, but also, there is in Mary this great opportunity to write an anti-romantic character who ends up in a romance. And I think every note we give to actors, if we're lucky enough to talk to them early on in their productions, is to say, neither Mary nor Arthur ever expected to have a love story written about them. They don't see it coming. They don't particularly care to be in it. they want nothing, and they don't recognize it. There's nothing about them that when they see each other has the like, hello, you. It's like, why are you looking at me? Why would anyone look at me? I'm busy reading. So writing a love story for people who don't believe in love, who don't understand it, is the greatest joy, because you can really have a fun with all the wonders of love stories, but play against all of it and deliver something kind of unique and exciting. And that was certainly true with Mary. And even in the writing, we kind of hoped to nod to our fellow Janeites out there who would kind of say, wait, this doesn't feel like Mary, which is part of why Darcy said, the scene that you so beautifully read, Darcy's like, I didn't know you were this. Thanks for showing me. And she was kind of like, oh, I guess I've always been here. Just, I've been like in puberty and making a fool of myself at parties, and nobody actually asked me anything that I want to talk about. So why would you know that I have anything to say? Which was quite fun. And it's the same with Anne de Bourgh, which we might talk about later. She's very, we see way less of her than even Mary, but the idea of, if her mother passes away, who is she? Who is she trying to be? Who is she failing at trying to be? And so giving her all the characteristics of her mother, but that she doesn't carry them as well, or doesn't really want to carry them that well, but feels she has to, created what we found as a great force against Mary and Arthur in the latter half of the play.
Nice, thank you.
So we have several questions asking about the last play in the trilogy. What can you tell us about the future of Christmas at Pemberley?
Well, thanks for it.
It's in process right now. So when we first started writing Miss Bennet, we didn't plan on writing a trilogy. However, we realized that, while Pride and Prejudice covers the story of Elizabeth and Jane, there are 3 other sisters whose story can be continued. And so play number 1 is Mary's story. Play number 2 is the Wickhams, which is the resolution of Lydia's terrible marriage. And play number 3, which, as I said, is in process, we're about halfway through the writing process of it, is going to focus on Kitty. And we also get to tell the story of Georgiana Darcy, which, she is, again, one of those lovely characters in Pride and Prejudice where you just don't get to see very much of her, but she's so intriguing, and she has this great backstory of like drama and some stuff. And so she's a great character to play
And
with.
we can see a little bit more of Darcy as big brother, which I love that side of him, how devoted he is. But y'all can only imagine Darcy as your big brother. Like that's a lot of pressure. So we revel in that combination of forces. And similarly, you know, with if you think about the kind of the chess of it, Kitty, who is Kitty when Lydia is off married to Wickham? She's had the house to herself for 2 years, and they were, of course, as we all know, just two cards in the same deck. I mean, just two peas in the pod. So what does she discover about herself, her personal journey, wit, aspirations, desires, when Lydia is off in her, as we say, terrible marriage? And so we're going to get a little bit of a changed Kitty, more of a blossomed Kitty. And yes, there'll be some love and some more pianofortes and all the good stuff.
I'm thrilled to see that Kitty is finally going to get her due. So
that's been the
Very-
biggest we've gotten from Jane Austen fans is like, you're gonna leave Kitty out? Come on, what's wrong with Kitty?
That's fun. So some people are asking more about additional transformations, including the Andeberg character. And as you mentioned, she had a even smaller role in the original novel, but lots of mentions about how meek or sickly and small she was. Yet she came into Pemberley, as one of our viewers writes, full of purpose and knowing exactly what she wanted. Tell us more about that transformation.
I mean, part of it is, I think, a desperation, somebody who has clung to her mother and had such a powerful force as a mother for so long, to be without mother, without, you know, there's no other siblings, to have this big old house, all of the pressures of running an estate like that, to be young. And, you know, I think with a mother like that, she has been told all her life how sickly she is. We don't actually know that she is. We've just been told that she is. So there's a little bit of what we absorb from the world around us, what the world tells us we are, which again is the story of Mary. In some ways, there's a parallel to our version of Anne, of kind of coming out and of that shell, the definitions that she's been given, and coming in and saying, the one thing I know is that I was supposed to marry Arthur, so here I am. That's, my mom told me that. That's what we're gonna do. And to see, you know, again, what has she learned in her life? The strongest woman in her life was her mother. And so in some ways, we stole a lot of Lady Catherine's persona that, again, she's kind of wearing as a costume. It's not really her. She's just going, this is the only model I have for how to get things done, is to come in and say what I want and expect people to just do them. So that's was kind of the fun of her, and realizing how young all of these characters are, and where they can go in this you know, transitional moment in their life.
Some of our participants have noticed that Mary is really becoming an interesting subject to a lot of different writers. Have you read any other versions of Mary Bennet, such as The Other Bennet Sister by Janice Hadlow, or is your version of Mary just coming from somewhere completely original?
I mean, I think everybody who works with these characters is using Jane Austen as your sort of primary source material. But from there, you know, we're all creating fiction. We're all creating further points of fiction. And so it really is, you know, imagining who these characters are in the story that we want to tell. Lauren and I are so interested in being in conversation with stories about women who are strong but maybe strong in unconventional ways, and who are funny in maybe unconventional ways, and who are unique, and, you know, and are entirely themselves. And I think everybody can sort of take Mary and turn her into what they want. This is just the direction that we chose. Because it is, I mean, it's funny, you know, Lauren and I often talk about reading Pride and Prejudice at different points in your life, and how you might identify with different sisters at different points in your life, depending on what's going on with you, or how you're evolving, or the circumstances of your life. But I think I have definitely felt like a Mary in many parts of my life. Very rarely do I get to feel like a Lizzie. But in those moments I'm like, yay. There are resonances about Mary, I think, that are kind of untapped. Everybody is sort of aspirationally Lizzie, but in reality, I think more of us are more like Mary than we'd want to admit.
That's totally true. I mean, I didn't read any of those, partly to kind of keep the creative focus on kind of what was organic between Margot and I. But I think that story of a smart woman who doesn't suffer fools, who actually doesn't care about any of the other societal markers that everyone around her values. She doesn't prioritize marriage. She's not she doesn't talk to men unless they're interesting and want to talk about science and books and stuff. So there's something that I think is lovely about it. And of course, it's not far away from the kind of feminism of Jane Austen. And that's part of why we felt right at home in this world, because it checked off all the other holiday play things we wanted to do, a little bit of time travel, a period piece, wonderful. Family, great. Women, perfect. But the idea of somebody, what's drawn me to Pride and Prejudice over and over again is that the internal work of somebody going, I will not settle. I'm not going to do it. And I know everyone, I should just marry Darcy for his money. Of course, that's what everyone's going to say. Is what my mom says. Somebody in my family is going to marry this man because he got a lot of money. But she says, no, I'm just not going to do that. That's the Lizzie that is so inspiring to so many. And it's just a simple thing of women knowing their worth and women knowing that they deserve to be loved, not just to have a complex relationship with somebody who respects you and respects your mind as well as every other part of you. So the idea of finding that feminism in Mary, I think there's an extra one because she's frankly less likable in the book. So we have more work to do for her and more of an example of like, yeah, women can come in all different varieties and they should all be respected and are all worthy of love. And I think that's something that the world certainly needs more stories of.
And I also think too, the lovely thing about Mary is that she does find love and she does find happiness by being herself, by being exactly who she is, and not trying to become more like Jane or more like Lizzie, but just by authentically being who she is. That's what Arthur falls for. And that's an important message, I think, as well, in the same way that it's exactly what Lauren said. It's important for women to know their worth. It's also important for women to know that they don't need to become something else to become attractive to the world.
In that scene we read aloud, you make great use of maps and vicarious travel, right? By reading about travel. This is one of our viewers wondered whether that was a nod at all to Emma Thompson's embellishment of the Margaret character in Sense and Sensibility, who also has a penchant for globes and atlases and vicarious travel. So it seems like this is also related to the various feminist thoughts that you are describing right now. Can you say a little bit more about why you chose to include those things?
I mean, for fans of Jane Austen, I think throughout the plays we were trying to find this very tight balance between being able to tell a story that you could enjoy even if you weren't familiar with Pride and Prejudice and familiar already with all of these characters and all of their backstory. We wanted it to be able to stand alone. And at the same time, we embedded all these little Easter eggs into the play, into both plays, into all three plays, that hopefully fans of Jane Austen we'll sort of grab hold of and latch on to. There's little turns of phrases that we tried to weave in, little references to different points, some of which are more effective than others. Like I was really insistent on trying to get this like wet, billowy white shirt moment into the Wickhams because like, I mean, we all know what I'm talking about, but it wasn't working and we ended up cutting it. But I was like, it's gonna work. You guys, we're all gonna appreciate that moment.
Just
And
give it to us. We've deserved it.
yeah.
But the other interesting thing is in terms of looking at Mary, our second play, The Wickhams, the bigger challenge and the bigger kind of anachronism is actually Lydia's story and how do you resolve it? Because truthfully at the time, I mean, we're kind of set it around 1814, 1815. And by that time, there had been one divorce instigated by a woman in the history of England. So once again, Lizzie is forefront with her tree and forefront with the idea that a woman should be able to leave a marriage she doesn't feel safe or respected in. So the idea of the Wickhams telling the story of this radical idea, a truly, truly radical idea at that moment of a woman saying, I married a man too young, kind of tricked into it, even though my romantic self, my youthfulness certainly thought I was in love, but didn't understand truly the whole concept of it. And then ended up somebody who's all full of debts and lies and all sorts of trickery and has had this pattern for a long time that can be established by several different people. But the idea that even with all that, it would be almost impossible to think of Lydia freeing herself from a marriage, even with a life that, she has so much life to live, and yet she has to be stuck with this person. So our second play actually tests that boundary of Regency feminism and tests that boundary of humanism and what freedom actually is for women. And I think what's most exciting is even though, Mary is a little bit of a dud in the book, she's likable. We crafted like she's just kind of hard and bookish and fine. We've had heroines that have that characteristics, and we love cheering for them. It's harder to cheer for like the pretty jerk girl, the pretty girl who is silly and kind of stepped in her own mess, and we all kind of go, I mean, you were really flirtatious. I mean, come on. So trying to create a character out of Lydia that would be somebody we can truly root for and empathize with and understand and say like, yeah, I feel for her. That's actually was a bigger challenge, and one that I'm really quite proud of. The conversations that have come after that play and talkbacks and things have been really satisfying. That's actually a story that's harder to sell, certainly to a Jane Austen feminist crowd. They kind of want to write Lydia off and be like, oh God, I don't know what to do with her. Just good luck, Godspeed. So that's kind of the other side of the Mary coin of how we find a heroine in Lydia.
Now we've got a question about the men in the play, who this participant thought was hilarious, loved the interactions between them. Were there any scenes between Darcy, Bingley, and Arthur that ended up on the cutting room floor?
There always are.
Yeah.
Yes. But those scenes are actually my favorite too. I love them so much. Just because, it's easy to forefront men. Even in Jane Austen, we spend a lot of time with them. And this was kind of nice to have them know their place. Like stay in the drawing room with your brandy and just wait to be told when you're needed.
We had so much fun writing the men because, especially I think too, we had so much fun with Darcy because in Pride and Prejudice, you never get to see Darcy at home. And I think Darcy at home is a very different guy than Darcy who has to present out in the world, right? And also, our story takes place 2 years after the end of Pride and Prejudice. And Lizzie has had an incredible influence on Darcy in terms of softening him up, but also allowing his sense of humor to come through, to relax a little bit. She is so playful and he is so not. And so what, playing with the idea of what does it look like when Darcy suddenly gets to be a little playful? Like who is that guy? Same with Bingley. Like Bingley is just the sweetest but like simplest soul you'd ever want to meet. And bless him, bless him. And so just the idea of like, who are these guys once they're settled? They're not under the pressure of like finding a lady and moving, getting married and all of that stuff. And then poor sweet Arthur, who, we had so much fun with the creation of Arthur de Burgh. He had to check off a lot of boxes in terms of what he accomplished in the plot of the play. But then in terms of how the character developed, we wanted to find someone who was really up to the task of Mary, right? And then we were also so fortunate to have an actor we worked with very early on in the process, in our like very first draft reading, who helped inform who Arthur was, with his style and sense of humor and approach to the world and approach to the work. And Adam McGill is his name, and he's amazing. And we really still think of him as sort of the prototypical Arthur, because a lot of what ended up into Arthur's character came from some of the choices that he made, and just the utter bewilderment of finding himself in like being fought over by two women when all he really wanted was to be reading a book somewhere. So, the men were just delightful to write, because so much of what they are in this story is extra, because the story really is driven by the women. And so the guys just get to be back there being like, we're along for the ride.
I mean, Darcy certainly has more to do in the Wickhams, partly because we get to see Mr. Wickham, who, of course, is such a delightful, villainous source of secrecy and confusion in Pride and Prejudice. And writing that was just absolute fun. And I will say one of my favorite sentences to write, I don't know if you wrote it, I wrote it, but either way, was when Darcy finally just gets to knock Wickham one, just punches him right in the face. Oh, so satisfying. It's so good. It always gets almost applause. So you can tell the Pride and Prejudice readers, you're like, you all wanted that. I know you did. So that writing that kind of stuff is really fun and satisfying in terms of thinking about the things you always wished someone would
So
do.
there's been quite a variety in the portrayal of the Arthur character in the versions that I've seen. Sometimes, in at least one case, I've also played by a woman.
Really?
And I'm wondering, so in your ideal, if this were made into a film, when this is made into a film, who would you cast as Mary and Arthur?
I have no idea. Oh my gosh. I don't know.
Great question. I mean, like if Issa Rae was a little bit, well, screw it, Issa Rae as Mary.
Sure.
Love that. Oh, she's so perfect.
Who I would love to see as Arthur is what is his name? The guy, you guys. He's the lead in the Netflix series Sex Education. And his name is, he was in Hugo. He's a young British actor.
Angus Imrie. Angus Imrie, someone offers here. Angus Imrie. No,
it's not him. It's anyway, he's amazingly like awkward, but
gotta be awkward.
Rounded.
Yes.
Yeah. Asa Butterfield. Yes, thank you. Asa Butterfield. He would be my choice for Arthur because he's so like genuine and sincere and earnest, but just wrong in many, many, many of his choices. And I just think that's delightful.
You know who would also be a good Mary is Maisie Williams. She would be great at
Yes.
that.
She would be great as, yeah, Maisie Williams would be great because she's got that dry humor
Mhm.
that's so on point. Yeah. But that's hard. That's a hard question because especially
Yeah.
too, because these characters are so young, keeping up with who all the young actors are out there is really challenging. But yeah.
Yes, Luigi. Somebody saw the Northlight production.
Oh, so good.
It is.
Yeah.
It's really. I mean, one of the joys. I encourage you all to write Jane Austen plays because you get to be in the room when these characters that you've known your whole life and these beloved literary figures just come alive. Somebody walks on and says, "Hi, I'm Mr. Darcy," and there you go. Suddenly you're in a room with Mr. Darcy. It's great news.
How do you feel about Mary Bennet being played by people of color? This participant says they saw the play in Cincinnati with an African-American actress and loved it, but when they posted about it, some posts stated their displeasure with the choice. So how do you feel about those particular choices?
I think it's wonderful. I think anybody who wants to play the role and the director feels that they're the right kind of person for the role, I think, again, Jane Austen's open for everybody. So. Oh, Lauren Modico was really good. Sorry, I'm looking at the chat of people, what productions they see.
Yeah. I mean, I had a mentor early on in my dramaturgy career tell me once that he said authenticity is the enemy of creativity, right? So like if what you're doing is trying to recreate history or trying to recreate what like an originalist point of view, for example, if what you're trying to do is do Shakespeare like Shakespeare would have done it, you're missing out on so many opportunities to um, recognize the world that we're living in today and draw the parallels between the world that we're living in today. And so, our approach, quite frankly, to all of working with Jane Austen material is that, you can't recreate the work that Jane Austen did. She was a genius of her time, reflecting her time, and there's no way that we could do that. What we can do is honor her work by reflecting a continuation of the story that is relevant and responsive to the world that we're living in. And that has to be reflected in casting choices too, because we are not in Regency era England. And we can, you know, we can reflect the world around us in a much more interesting way.
In relation to the casting, there's another question here. When an actress, someone saw your play in Chicago where the Anne de Burgh was a tall, sturdy, statuesque, almost operatically built person. So what kind of variety have you seen in the portrayals of Anne?
Every kind under the sun, I think.
Yeah, it's been all over the place. And what's really interesting is less about the physicality of Anne, but more about the choices that the actor makes in terms of telling the story of the arc of Anne from when she walks in at the end of Act 1 to where she lands at the end of Act 2, because it's a really remarkable journey where she starts her story in the play is so strident and sort of forceful and sort of uncompromising and really sort of unaware of anyone around her, quite frankly. And she gets to a really interesting place at the end of the play, and that's a complicated journey for someone to take on in the course of 45 pages. And so the physicality is one part of it, but a lot of it is also like taking the audience with them on the emotional journey of discovery of like, I don't have to be that person, and I do have family. I didn't think I did, but Pemberley might be a place where I could be and live in the world and connect with people. And, at the end of Miss Bennet, Lydia is offering to take Anne de Bourgh to all the parties in London at the New Year. And Anne is like, oh, that could be me, I guess. Wow. Okay. So again, like the physicality is so much to us anyway. I think it's so much less important than an actor who can really tell all of these stories. How do you tell the story of the evolution of these characters over the course of the play?
How do you do dialogue? How do you get the voice just right, especially when you're dealing with such beloved characters?
The truth is, I underwrite, Margot overwrites, and we meet somewhere in the middle when we when we cut each other. I usually cut Margot, and Margot adds to me. But the truth is that Margot has a better ear for Regency era dialogue and faithfulness to Jane, the way that Jane Austen is read on the page. But the difference of a novel and a play are quite far apart. And if you just read the dialogue exactly as she wrote it, or the kind of dialogue, it would be too much, not energetic enough for the theater. It would drag. And that's the last thing we would want to do, is to take the amazing Jane Austen and make her boring. So what we need to do for the theater is to make things faster, zippier, get to the point, people cutting off, speaking over each other, moving at the pace of a busy life. So that's kind of where we're walking that dialogue, which I'm a little bit more of the like short, sweet, moving on, and Margot.
And I write everything as a paragraph. And then Lauren goes in and cuts half of it, and it still makes perfect sense and sounds Regency enough, but it doesn't take 45 minutes to say.
Sounds like a great partner.
I love that collaborative process.
Got to do it.
Is there another Jane Austen? And obviously, you're Jane Austen. You've referred to several of the other novels. Is there another one that you would like to adapt?
Oh, I mean, maybe we kind of have to finish this process first.
And I mean, I will just betray a little bit that I'm actually fascinated more by Jane Austen, the person. And I got to visit her house in Chatham. And for those of you who've been, it is just a remarkable, magical place that needs our help right now. I think their roof is leaking. So if you can donate, donate to that museum. But it was so amazing. And I remember texting Margot pictures of me right next to the supposed desk, probably isn't the actual desk, but similar desk, fine. And so anyway, I'm kind of just really in love with history and these true stories. So I'm kind of trying to convince Margot, maybe we'll go in that direction. We'll see, who knows, but her life, her sister, her family is absolutely worthy of great drama as well.
Yeah, fantastic. I think we would all enjoy that.
Going back to your collaborative process, was there anything during the writing that was a sticking point for either of you, that one of you wanted to cut and the other wanted to keep, for example?
Of course. There are things that like Lauren would write a joke and I was like, this is not going to work. Lauren, it's not funny. It's not going to work. We just need to cut it. And she's like, wait till we get an audience. They're going to laugh. And I was like, okay. And of course they laughed. And of course I was wrong, but it's those moments where it's like,
there were a lot of those that did get cut. I was like, all right, that's terrible. You're right.
but truly, like, when you write something, you hear it in your head a very specific way. And if it's not, it doesn't always come through that clearly in the beginning. I had a joke. No, it's not even really a joke. I had a bit in Wickhams that I was desperate to keep because I was like, this is so meaningful and great and smart. And it just was like slowing down the most important moment to move forward. And finally, Lauren was like, we have to lose the thing. And I was like, but it's the murder your darlings writer problem, right? Like you have to cut the thing that you love the most, and that's usually the thing that opens everything else up.
Can you tell us about that little gem that you cut though?
What was that? I can't remember it now.
Oh, so there's this moment in the Wickhams when Mr. George Wickham is being an absolute gross scoundrel, and he's kind of hitting on Cassie, who's the housemaid. And there was this bit of dialogue that I had written where he's trying to get her to smile. And for all women everywhere who have ever been walking down the street and had some man come up to you and say, "Give me a smile, sweetheart," I was like, this is the Regency era version of how disgusting that moment is. And I wanted to keep it, and I wanted to keep it, and I wanted to keep it. But when we saw it, it was just getting in the way of Cassie being able to react to how gross Wickham was being in that moment. So we had to cut it. But I loved it. I still love it.
It's interesting because Wickham's has a darker underbelly because of who Wickham is and his past and his habits of, stealing away young women and wooing and lying. And, so we really had to kind of, Miss Bennet has a much kind of more delightful kind of happy center, even though all the drama kind of swirls around it. But the Wickhams, we had to go to certainly more serious place about class and about all sorts of things that women have to deal with, no matter who you are or how you're born.
So one of our viewers thought that that your witty plot of misplaced letters and multiple love interests reminded her more of Oscar Wilde in some ways than Austen. Was Oscar Wilde an influence at all upon you?
Not so much. I mean, for me, it's actually more Shakespeare. I mean,
That's
we're just
what I felt too.
all
Yeah.
the British, the best of the Brits. Because yes, mistaken identity, getting the wrong note, the wrong person, that's a kind of common plot point. And we thought, because our play is so much about books, how can we use them as a plot device that doesn't last for too long, because it's deeper than those kind of shenanigans. But yes, well, I will always be compared to Oscar Wilde. I won't turn that down.
Several people have also asked about future adaptations of this play. One person wanted to know if you guys would ever turn it into a novel, while somebody else asked if you had ever been approached for film rights. Are there any interesting futures out there for these plays?
Sure. I think probably no on the novel. Oof, man. Y'all who write novels out there. I know one of the attendees wrote Unmarriageable, and I'm like, wow, how did you write that? So good. So yes, all the novelists out there, praise, but certainly not for me. Margot, you can do it though.
Oh, no. Come on now. No.
But yeah, I mean, I think there are versions of this that could live on TV and film, but we'll see what happens.
And how did you come up with the bird bracelet idea? Is there a particular bird symbolism? This is an uncaged bird, I guess.
I mean, birds are great symbolism. I think that was probably me being silly. I just like the joke of something about Lydia's voice in my mind saying, "A little bird." Just made me laugh over and over. So sometimes those goofy things that make you giggle just end up in print somewhere. How does that happen? But yes, I love anyone who handles that line, and that prop is, all respect.
Fun.
Do you know when the third play will premiere and where it will be done?
It was supposed to be now.
Yeah, in the before times, we were supposed to have premiered at two different theater companies this fall. It would have opened just after Thanksgiving. And because of the pandemic and the closures of all the theaters, we have had to put that off. So our understanding is that it'll be premiered at three different companies in November of 21. Hopefully, if everything goes according to plans and theaters can reopen. Those companies, that's Marin Theater Company, Northlight Theater in Chicago, and
Jungle
Theater, thank you, in Minneapolis.
So hopefully we'll see you next year.
Yeah. And we are it's so interesting too, because the theaters who have been producing these plays have, they're all very excited to have part 3. And some of them are talking about doing, doing them sequentially, one each year, and just sort of rotating Miss Bennet, Wickhams, Kitty and Georgiana. Some very ambitious companies are talking about getting together like one gigantic cast and doing a rep of all 3 of them. So on one night you can see Miss Bennet, the next night you could see Wickhams, and then the third night you could see Kitty and Georgiana. And we've also had companies ask us whether or not there is a way to rewrite them so that they're all woven together. And so, because Miss Bennet, as you know, takes place over the course of like 4 days around the Christmas holiday, the Wickhams takes place over a slightly staggered 4 days around the same Christmas, but all happens in the below stairs, sort of a la Downton Abbey. And then Kitty and Georgiana, spoiler alert, part of it also takes place during that same time as well. So there's the possibility of writing one sort of master story that weaves all of these plots together and they all happen at the same time. We need to finish part 3 before we even consider that. But, as far as I'm concerned, if there's interest in doing these kinds of things, we're up for it, sure.
Oh, that sounds so fun. I hope you can do that. One of our viewers is asking whether any Canadian companies are putting on your plays.
I think so. There was a production last year I thought I heard about, but I can't
There
remember.
was a production in Vancouver, and then I think there was one in Toronto.
Maybe someone on here knows, but yes. It is, I can't overstate how fun it is at this time of year. Usually we get the press pictures of all the different casts all over the country. It's so delightful. I wish I could just make wallpaper out of them all. They're just so great.
Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We would like to extend our thanks again to Lauren and Margot for joining us today and having such a fascinating conversation. For those of you who still have not seen these plays, never fear. There are a number of readings and performances being live streamed online. Main Street Theater will be doing The Wickhams as a virtual production, I believe December 18th to the 20th. The Strand Theater still has their production of Miss Bennet going on, and Capitol Stage Theater is doing a radio play of, I believe it's Miss Bennet. Is that correct?
Yep.
Yes. So there's lots of options for you guys out there to incorporate some more Jane Austen into your holiday season. While this is our final program of the year, we are pleased to state that we will return in the new year with our 2021 series, Race and the Regency. To stay updated on our future events and learn when those might be, please sign up for our email list at janeaustenandco.org or follow us on Facebook at Jane Austen and Company or at Jane Austen Summer.
Sorry, I was muted. And if you would like to learn more about the Jane Austen Summer Program, please check out our blog at janeaustensummer.org. The Jane Austen Summer Program is a 4-day symposium that happens annually in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. We bring together Jane Austen scholars, Jane Austen fans, Jane Austen super fans, actually, and we have a series of conversations, lectures. We have a Regency Ball each year, and it is really just a delightful weekend where we can all come together and just be together in our love of Austen and learn a little something too.
And thank you. I'd like to say thank you for the nearly 200 people who attended today's event, coming from as far as Canada and Australia. If you enjoyed tonight's programming, we would like to ask you to consider making a donation to the Jane Austen Summer Program before the end of the year. We are a registered nonprofit, so if your donations are tax deductible in the US, your donations are what help us keep Jane Austen and Company free and open to the public. and they allow us to bring in great speakers like Lauren and Margot. But they also go to supporting our other activities like our student essay contests and our annual teacher scholarships, which allow middle and high school teachers to come to JASP and learn about how to teach Jane Austen and teach earlier women's literature in general.
Thank you again, Lauren and Margot, for coming. And thank you, everyone. Please remain healthy and safe and enjoy the holidays. We hope you have a happy new year.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.